Excuse me. I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Dinko?
Present.
Commissioner Wall?
Here.
Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Vice Chair Parilla?
Present.
Chair DaCosta?
Present. Tonight we're going to put Commissioner Dinko in the hot seat. Per my script, you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir. Right hand over your heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3.1, Officer Shuck, Code Enforcement Update.
Good evening, Chairman DaCosta and Commissioners. For you, I have the stats for code enforcement for the last 30 days. We've had a total of 136 cases open. Of those cases, 136 cases created. Of those cases, we have 88 open, 48 closed. With the fastest close request type has been abandoned shopping carts. Our slowest close request type has been the illegal dumping. Most common have been trash recycling and green waste containers in public view. And least common type in the last 30 days has been unpermitted structures. We've had an average time to close of 8 days. For our sign detail, we've had our part-time code enforcement technician working Saturdays, who's pulled in the last 30 days 662 signs. Our code enforcement volunteer was able to provide 2 full Sundays, pulling a total of 82 signs. Street sweeping citations issued by both our street sweeping officer as well as the CSOs. We have a total of 665 citations in the last 30 days. I have a staffing update. Our code enforcement technician full-time, Jared Perez, is in his 4th week. He's currently in field training. More recently, we've reached the phase in which Jared has been able to take on a caseload of general nuisance type cases, and he's been managing that very well. We're still working on officer safety, public contact, and just kind of the day-to-day procedures. Recently posted on the city website is our senior code enforcement officer position, which is scheduled to close next week, Wednesday, December 6th. This will conclude my update, and I'm available for any questions.
Any questions?
I just had a quick question. For the sign you're talking about, is that like you drive down the street and you have real estate agents post their signs everywhere and they don't come back and collect them? Is that
Correct. It's a variety of signs, real estate agent signs, as well as garage sale signs, advertisement for businesses, any signs which go out on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, which are not meeting setbacks.
And then as far as like those that you collected or left up, is there follow-up with the agent that put it up that they get charged for, or is it just the city's cleaning up and that's just the reality of?
No, so for any signs which have the information, and per the municipal code, every sign which is posted has to have contact information, which of course real estate agent signs typically have that. We do follow up with the real estate agents and advising that their signs have been pulled over the weekend, or even if it's done during the week, and provide them 72 hours to pick up the signs. If they're a first-time offender, the signs are released with an acknowledgement form signed by the real estate agent that basically says for any repeat offense, they're obligated to pay $7 per sign for their release for any future signs pulled.
Perfect. Thank you.
With regard to shopping carts, do we go out on those very often?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably been on average, every week we're pulling anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 shopping carts from public right-of-way. They're-
How do we pull them? Do you put them in the truck?
Yeah, we pick them up and relocate them to the retailer.
Have you ever have any success with a service? I know there's some services out there. I don't know if you've attempted that or if it's not worked.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dinko, that is something that we are looking into. We had brought forth to City Council several weeks ago a shopping cart ordinance, and I'm not pleased with the results of that ordinance because the objective was to shift the burden to the retailer, and I don't find that to be the case. We are still picking up shopping carts, even though most of the shopping centers have conditioned the tenant to recover their shopping carts. They still aren't doing it. So we are looking into contracting with a service that is going to take care of that, and basically the tenant's going to have to pay the service provider to recover their cart. Unfortunately, I think that will speak more to the responsible party because there's a financial interest for them to keep track of their carts instead of paying to recover them.
Okay, I'll do a little follow-up on that and get back to you. I know there was a service out there, companies out there that would come out, collect them, and for free, and then return them for basically like a bounty to the different services. I've used them in the past, so I don't know if they're still out there. I just haven't called in a while.
Right, that is exactly what we're looking into. It's basically they're going to pick it up and hold it, and Vons, Home Depot will have to pay
Buy them back.
by piece to get them back.
Awesome.
The cost of a shopping cart is about $450. So I think they'll want to recover them.
Yeah.
Some of our newer tenants have been very cooperative up front, like Smart and Final has put a locking system on all of their shopping carts, hence you will not see any of them outside of that shopping center. And the future Walmart as well is going to be corralling their shopping carts. And some of the other providers, once we gave them notice about the shopping cart ordinance coming, they went and took proactive measures, but not everybody got on that bus. So we're going to come back and revisit that and find something that really takes the burden off of code enforcement to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Thank you, Andrew. I want to remind everyone, thank you for being here tonight. As a reminder, if you would like to speak before the commission tonight, please complete a blue speaker request form and give it to the clerk to my right, your left, prior to the item. Thank you. Next is our monthly police department update.
Good evening, gentlemen. I've got some updated stats from October to present to you tonight. Our calls for service increased by 10% to 2,781 calls for service total. That's up from 2,523 in September. Our total traffic collisions increased by 15% to 81, which is an increase from 70 in September. Injury collisions increased by 20% from 10 to 12. Non-injury traffic collisions also increased 15% from 60 to 69. Our total citations decreased by about 21% from 504 to 398. Moving citations decreased by 4% from 268 to 256. Parking citations increased by 85% from 268 to 497. Vehicle burglaries saw an 8% decrease from 25 to 23. Our noise calls saw a 32% increase from 58 to 77. And our mail thefts decreased by 26% from 41 to 30. We don't have any UCR stats for October at this time, but for September we have those stats in. We have 0 homicides, 0 rapes. We had 2 robberies. We had 12 aggravated assaults. Burglaries, I actually have a typo here, and that's blank. I apologize. I can get those numbers for you next time. Larceny thefts are at 66, and vehicle thefts are at 19.
19 for which
Vehicle theft.
reporting period?
That's for September.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Did you want to ask anything regarding the robberies, if to differentiate the types that
I thought we were going to get that later in the agenda.
later in the
Yeah.
agenda? Okay. Are we having an update to further in the agenda items for the purpose of discussing other particular details of the traffic, police update reports regarding robberies and other things of that nature? Because I know that was brought up at last meeting.
Can you refresh my memory? You're talking about specific details of each case?
Yeah, no, the last meeting, I asked about what type of robberies they were relative to street 211s versus residential versus business 211s. And I was just trying to get the number or the hard numbers of what type of robberies were occurring within the city. And you don't have them now.
Yeah, I don't have specifics on any of those cases.
That's okay. We can get to them at the next meeting.
Well, maybe for additional clarification on that, if I may. One of the things I'd hope to see is it shows 17 robberies year to date on the report. I'd like to know how many are Estes robberies as opposed to actual residential or true business robberies, like a holdup. I mean, which is like a 490.5 and it turns into a robbery as opposed to, an actual robbery where they designed beforehand to rob somebody, maybe it be a wallet robbery or a purse snatch that turned into a robbery. Just kind of getting a feel for, do we have a robbery problem or is this just a 490.5 Estes robbery issue? It'd just be nice to kind of, on that one, because they can be a little deceptive, to hammer it down.
Yeah, I can talk with the administration and see what kind of additional information we can provide. Obviously, with all the Part 1 crimes, there's numerous cases, so it might be a little more extensive in detailing each category into what the specific circs are, but we can discuss that.
Sure.
We can give the robbery stats to you by next public safety meeting.
Okay.
On the breakdown commercial and residential.
Awesome.
Robberies are relatively a low number.
Yeah.
That'll be easier for us to present.
Yeah. Because it looks like a big number, but I bet it's probably a low number. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioners, just for clarification, a few things. It's a little bit difficult to hear you over here, so if you guys could please remember to speak directly into the microphones. You can move them closer to you if that helps. And then also for the crime stats that we provide as part of the agenda packet, some of the level of detail that you're asking for is going to just make this report a lot more cumbersome, and we had discussed trying to keep it rather concise. So some of the details I would prefer that they're given verbally to you guys instead of this report becoming a big, huge, highly detailed breakdown of.
I agree. I don't think what's really being asked is necessarily an item for item explanation, but there's a very specific type of robbery that is sometimes a theft and it turns into a robbery. Somebody leaving a store that's stealing a pair of pants and then turns around and now it's a robbery because he threatened somebody. And just a rough breakdown, like, well, about 3 of those 17 are those types of robberies. Kind of helps add clarification.
Okay, and we can do that verbally,
At least for me, that's all I need, a verbal, kind of a rough breakdown. At least for me, that I can.
Perfect.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. There will be no fire department update. Justin Scribner is unable to attend this evening. Item 3.4, City of Eastvale Complete Streets Safety Assessment.
Good evening, Chair DaCosta and members of the council, as commission.
Good evening,
Craig Gretsch, supervising engineer. We'd like to kind of give you an overview of the complete street safety assessment that was conducted. About a year ago, staff applied for, it's an OTS grant that comes through the Institute of Transportation Studies with the University of California, Berkeley. And they come in and they do what's called complete street safety assessment. They have a professional traffic engineer and also a professional enforcement officer come in, and they review the stats and they look at all the data, particularly the traffic accident data, and they make recommendations. And well, be careful when I say recommendation. They make suggestions. They're very careful to say that that this was a fairly quick overview that they conducted in basically over a month's period of time, and that what they're providing with us is really strictly suggestions based on their experience, and that further studies may be needed. But just really, this is just an overview. You have the complete document in front of you, and we'd be glad to answer any questions. Just to show you where most of the data came from. They do what's called, they look at their OTS rankings, Office of Traffic Safety rankings, and they use the SWTRS data exclusively. That's how we were selected as one of the few cities to have this conducted. And they looked at also later on when they started doing this study, they looked at the collision data the Eastville Police Department has that's outside of the SWTRS. They look at, kind of a rough history of the city of Eastville, realizing we are a fast-growing city, and they feel like we would be a good candidate for this type of study. We provide them speed information from different locations within the city from our speed survey. They reviewed the bicycle master plan and also our circulation element. This is the copy of the OTS, Office of Traffic Safety rankings, based on the SWTRS data. And SWTRS is a statewide integrated traffic reporting system. And it's computerized. We have access to it. They take our demographics. We're in the 50 to 100,000 population. And there's about 102 cities in 2011, roughly 105 cities in 2014. There was no data in 2013. But we get ranked based on pedestrian accidents and so forth. And let's just look at 2014. As far as pedestrians go, we were 100 out of 102 cities, which means we had the lowest number of pedestrian accidents in general. Out of 102 cities, we were ranked 100. If we were ranked 1, we'd have the worst accident rate. Pedestrians under 15 were kind of more in the middle of the pack. 62 out of 105 cities. Pedestrians 65 plus, there's not a lot of 65 plus, so we rank fairly well in that category. Bicyclists, we ranked 60 out of 105, but then bicyclists under 15, we ranked 9 out of 105. And that's a concern. That's not really a very good ranking out of 105 cities. This is really hard to see, but basically it shows a number of cities. It shows the different numbers of accidents. It's really, in my opinion, this is so you can appreciate that we're dealing with fairly small data sets. And if we have a number of accidents, say pedestrian accidents or bicycle accidents, it can really skew things one year. And so we have to be careful when we're interpreting this type of data. Just really informational, pedestrian traffic collisions by day of week. Most of the accidents occur during the school week. For some reason, Tuesdays and Thursdays have the most accidents. We're not sure why that is. And then this is by hour of day, just when school is starting and when school gets out. That's when you see most of the pedestrian accidents. There was a few things that, few points that they make. Of all the Eastville pedestrian collisions, 50% were pedestrians' fault. 40% of all pedestrian collisions occurred within crosswalks. And the two most common violations were vehicles failing to yield to pedestrians within a crosswalk and pedestrians failing to yield to vehicles mid-block. And so those two violations account for about 46% of all the collisions. The highest number of pedestrian collisions occurred along Scholar Way corridor. And Scholar Way seems to keep popping up as far as having a high accident rate. The average distance a mid-block pedestrian was struck was within 51 feet of an intersection. Anyway, some interesting comments. This is by vehicle code, the percentage of primary collision factors for pedestrians. Failure to yield to pedestrian in crosswalk is the large majority of those. And pedestrians outside the crosswalk failing to yield, and then pedestrians within a crosswalk abruptly walking into the path of a vehicle. That kind of counts for the majority of the accidents, and also there's a failure to stop. But that's kind of a breakdown of how the accidents are occurring as far as primary collision factors. Okay, there were 11 pedestrian traffic collisions resulting in serious injury that occurred in Eastville during the 3-year period, 2014 to 2016. Pedestrians were determined to be at fault about 5 of those collisions. Most of the collisions happening during typical commuter periods, and that was their findings. Now we'll shift to bicycle traffic. Bicycle collisions. This is day of week. Again, school days, Tuesday and Thursday for some reason are there are a few more collisions. And again, this is by time of day. Not too surprising. The majority of the collisions are right around when school starts, right around when school gets out. And again, here's the vehicle code sections that they were cited. They were written up in the Switters report. Bicyclists not riding in the same direction as a vehicle. We see this very often, and we seem to, kind of ignore it. But what happens when bicyclists are riding the opposite direction of the motorists? They're harder to anticipate. They may cross streets, and cars may not be looking for them, coming in the opposite direction. Sometimes bicyclists will ride their bikes through a crosswalk, and they're not expected to be riding a bike going as fast, and motorists miss them. Then the second one was failure to yield to through traffic from a stop sign. Failure to stop for a red light. I think we all see that, and perhaps as bicyclists we should be really cautious, that we obey the traffic laws, because this is where the accidents occur. Interesting one, failure to yield to pedestrian in a crosswalk. Unsafe turning movement, and it kind of goes down from there. Failure to yield from driveway or alley. If the motorist is backing out, again, if he's going in opposite direction or he's on the sidewalk, they're not really anticipating a bicyclist to be traveling at such a speed, particularly on a sidewalk, and that's usually where bicyclists get caught at alleyways or driveways. And of course, going on down, failure to stop at stop signs and so forth. Okay, primary causes of bicycle-involved collisions. As far as the Switters analysis, of the 48 bicycle collisions, 54% of the time the bicyclist was at fault. 78% of bicycle collisions were mid-block, not at intersections. And the most frequent roadway where bicycle collisions occurred was the Scholar Way corridor. There we go again with Scholar Way. This is hard to read, but it kind of gives you a smattering of where all these accidents are occurring. They're really spread out quite a bit, but you'll see that Schleichman appears several times, Harrison appears, Scholar Way appears. There's some hot pots in the city. Archibald has had a number of accidents. Here we go. This is kind of a breakdown. Scholar Way has had 7 collisions in those 3 years that were studied. Schleichman Road, 5 collisions. Limonite, 3 collisions. Hamner Avenue, 3 collisions. And Citrus Street, 3 collisions. Top locations for bicycle traffic collisions as far as intersections are concerned: Scholar Way at 68, that was somewhat of a surprise. Limonite Avenue and Hamner Avenue, Scholar Way and Orange, and Schleichman Road and Harrison Avenue. Those are the top locations where bicycle accidents. This is a little bit small to see, but it shows pedestrian and bicyclists involved collisions and kind of shows how they're spread throughout the cities. Most of them are associated with school traffic and around major intersections. A number of right-hand turning movements were involved, but it kind of gives you a feel as far as the demographics go. There's a number of things that the report mentions that we're doing right. We have a bicycle master plan. We've installed speed feedback signs in the school areas. We have some flashing beacons at uncontrolled crosswalks. All the school zones were properly signed. We have a grant to install countdown pedestrian indicators throughout most of the city that we're working through that process that should be occurring this next calendar year. We have good use. We have all the new, for the most part, they're all new signals and signal heads. We have the 12-inch signal heads and back plates. Many of our signals have fully protected left turn phasing. We have good relationship with the Sheriff's Department. Most of our access ramps are ADA compatible, and we have clearly visible markings on all the major streets. These are the 5 corridors that they analyzed in greater detail: 65th Street, Scholar Way, Harrison Avenue, Schleichman, and Archibald. And they come to a few conclusions, but they made some very general comments without going through a lot of detail. But the installation of high visibility crosswalks, we've been doing that around schools. You'll see more of those installed in the upcoming month with this recent resurfacing project that we have. They suggested installing some different pedestrian intervals. That will require some studying if we're looking at additional phasing on signals. Implementation of no right turn on red, and they mentioned eastbound 65th Street at Harrison Avenue. We're looking at that. We do have that installed at some locations on Schleichman and Harrison, where there's been an accident rate. Installing speed feedback signs, mentioned that before. We have not implemented green bicycle lanes in conflict areas. Some of these things will be considered when we resurface the streets. That's the best time to be making changes. And reviewing yellow change intervals and red clearance intervals. And we've reviewed that. We have reviewed those. Medium term, they suggest installing bike detection at all signalized intersections. Many of the intersections have a video detection, and so they are able to pick up bicyclists, and so that's really that's occurring in most of the intersections. Installing temporary curb extensions. These are all just really suggestions. Perhaps in certain areas, maybe some of these things make sense. We don't really see the viability of a few of these things in our specific circumstances. And they also talk about implementing a separate right-hand turn overlap phase. That's a separate phasing issue that requires changing of signals. And we have to look at those types of things on a case-by-case basis and be able to determine, budgeting, what budget's available. Long-term, this is where it gets more interesting. Removing traffic lanes and implementing buffered bike lanes, or what's called a Class 4 bike lane. And I've got a picture of a Class 4 bike lane here in just a moment. Removing traffic lanes, installing angled parking near Hirata Heritage Park, installing raised medians to narrow roadway width, installing curb extensions to reduce crossing distances and speeds of turning vehicles. So some fairly generic, and then they also made some specific comments. This is a picture of 65th Street between, this is actually next to Hirata Park. There's a suggestion of adding back in parking at this location and reducing the number of travel lanes that we have. We have received a grant to do something similar to that, and we'll be bringing those details and full information will be reviewed by this commission before we proceed with any of those types of things. There's also on Harrison, they mentioned the connectivity with at Chandler on Harrison, the connectivity with the Santa Ana Regional Trail. And fairly recently, WRCOG added Harrison Avenue to their regional trail system because of its connectivity with the Santa Ana Trail and connectivity to the north of us. There may be some grant opportunities there also. Scholar Way, it mentioned Scholar Way at Baltimore. In this report, they were talking about the flashing lights and how to make some improvements. There's actually a traffic signal that's been designed for this location, and the high school will be relocating its entrance to line up with Baltimore. And I think that's probably, 6 months or so out before that installation will occur. But that's one of the recommendations they made, and we'd already started through this process.
I'm sorry, you said relocate it?
The entrance to the high school will be relocated so it lines up with Baltimore, and there'll be a traffic signal installed at that location.
I see.
That'll help the circulation and help with pedestrians crossing. There was the mention of what's called a Class 4 bike lane. You've got several different classes of bike lanes. A Class 1 is one that's like the Santa Ana River Trail. A Class 2 is the one that is striped on the roadway. I'm trying to think what the Class 3 is. But I think
a buffered curb.
actually this is a Class 4 where you've got a buffer and you separate the two. This is called a cycle track or a Class 4. For some reason, the Class 3 is not jumping into my mind. But this is what they like to see is a Class 4 where you can separate the bikes. We may, when we resurface in front of the high school and in that area, we may consider doing some type of improvement where we can separate the bikes. There seems to be a high bicycle use there. We're by the intermediate school. Anyway, that's just so you can understand what a Class 4 bike lane is. Then there's also the appendix, and it has a toolbox of a number of things to help with this complete streets concept. I have a short presentation on complete streets. Maybe we can jump to that one. And just, we're talking about complete street safety assessment. I think there's not a real strong understanding what complete streets is. Okay, I just actually pulled this off the internet. I thought it was pretty good. Complete streets are streets for everyone, no matter who they are or how they travel. They gotta be safe, comfortable, and convenient. This is based on a survey that was done a few years ago. 66% of Americans want more transportation options, so they have a freedom to choose how to get to where they need to go. 73% currently feel they have no choice but to drive, and 57% would like to spend less time in their car. That's probably higher in California. In general, 59% say we need to improve public transportation and make it easier to walk and bike and to reduce traffic congestion, and 38% says let's build more roads. Okay, of all trips, about 50% of them are less than 3 miles. And 28% are 1 mile, and of these trips, about 60% are driven. So in general, most people drive even if they're less than 1 mile away. And the reality is every trip starts and ends with walking, so there's really a potential to improve walkability and make things safer as far as the pedestrian and bicycle is concerned. 46% will walk 1 mile to church or school. 1% will walk 3 to 4 miles to church or school. And again, 35% will walk 1 mile to work. 1% will walk 3 to 4 miles to work. How would it be to live that close to work?
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, who wants complete streets? 47% older Americans feel it's unsafe to cross any major street near their home. 54% of older Americans live in neighborhoods that they would walk and bike more often if the environment was improved. And 56% express strong support for adoption of a complete streets policy. Millennials are driving less and looking for other transportation options as far as who wants complete streets. 40% of pedestrians' deaths in 2007-2008 occurred where there was no crosswalk available. Incomplete streets are unsafe, and they give a list. In our area, it's in large measure it's children that have been in these accidents in our cities. Streets are inadequate, no sidewalks, too dangerous to cross on foot, big wide streets. Unsafe for people or bicycles. The streets are inadequate. It's a classic picture of downtown LA in many places. Just too much traffic, and all you have is places for vehicles. Uninviting for bus riders. This is a bus stop located in the bushes on the side of the road. Inaccessible for wheelchair users. At least in our city, we're fairly new, and we have pretty good accessibility to all of it, and accessibility to sidewalks, and with a small exception, we have sidewalks throughout most of the city. no room for people, and just all. And they run through some examples of some things to do. Enhancing crosswalks, we're in the process of doing that throughout the city. Trying to have a place for the various different modes of transportation, sidewalks, bicyclists, transit, cars. This is your this is your typical Class 2 bike trail. There's room for the motorists, the bicyclists. There's places actually to park and places for pedestrians to walk. Yeah, it's a lot of roads have this look. Sidewalks to nowhere. People in wheelchairs in the street. And so the solution is complete streets policy. In fact, most of the grants that we can apply for require us to look at complete streets. That's the basis of most of the transportation grants now, is to implement complete streets. The policy is to ensure that the entire right-of-way is planned, designated, designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to provide safe access for all users. So it's really a high policy direction, and really every time we resurface a street, we need to look at our master bike plan. We have to look at complete streets concepts and see what will work for our city. And it's going to be an incremental approach. There's no real simple solution for everything. We can just say we've got to do this on every street. We have to look at each street separately. We have to look at traffic volumes. We have to look at where people are going. It's really it depends on land use and a number of issues. Just some more examples. This is classic. A number of bridges don't have paved shoulders. You have to take the lane if you're a bicyclist. Low traffic residential streets, as long as you have low speeds, they're very safe for bicyclists. Again, you start seeing these in more areas, the smaller residential streets. They still have to be able to meet the requirements of emergency services, though. Main streets with the different elements. Shared commercial streets. There's lots of different concepts that have been implemented quite successfully. Traffic circles, some cities have used quite a few traffic circles to help control intersections. Just more examples. Parking on streets instead of traffic lanes, where they get the traffic volumes to work. Protected bike lanes, a number of these have popped up in Los Angeles. This is your typical Class 2 bike lanes. Modern roundabouts, we don't see too many of these being installed. Whenever a freeway interchange is designed, it's a Caltrans requirement to look into the roundabout and see if roundabout will work. And they do that mainly because there's a lower accident rate with roundabouts. And just some more information. Anyway, that concludes my report. I'd be glad to answer questions you may have.
Commissioners?
I think
I'll just say,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
reference complete streets. I did learn in the 80s that nobody walks in LA, and that probably applies to the Eastvale too. I mean, with the bedroom community, it's really hard to find a lot of these that are useful for us. And being a new community, we have the advantage of almost everything has a sidewalk, which is good.
Yeah, right.
That really helps. But with regard to the report, I was really encouraged by some of the statistics, not discouraged. A low number of, at least in 2014, low amount of pedestrians injured in traffic collisions. It's really good. I understand the bicyclists under 15 years of age was high, but it might have been a small data set, so it's hard to know without seeing the numbers. But I appreciated reading the report and going through it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought it was an outstanding report as well. Very thorough, very detailed. On page 4, one of the things that I noticed on the 30% failure to yield for pedestrians, I think that's a problem that law enforcement will probably tell you we have statewide. That's just one of the bigger problems that we as law enforcement officers have to deal with on a daily basis. I think one of the things that I'd like to see is public education through some form, and I'm wondering if the Sheriff's Department has pamphlets or something they can drop off at City Hall so we can talk to pedestrians about, while they have the right of way in the crosswalk, don't assume that that car is going to stop for you. And I think that can reduce a lot of fatalities or even accidents. So maybe that's something we can look at if possible.
Sorry, good evening, Chair DeCosta and council members. Yeah, as far as us, we're going to have the OTS grant money. We actually have several operations planned that's grant funded, including pedestrian safety and bicyclist safety, and also distracted driver. And distracted drivers are a high percentage of the accidents caused by the drivers, you know, cutting in front of somebody in a crosswalk. So we will, and we do have planned to have a couple operations in the near future, next couple months. So.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you, sir.
I'd just like to say, bicycle safety and dedicated Class 4 bike lanes. I know a lot of this is tied to grant funding to push the engineering component of bicycle safety, but we have such a relatively small sample size. I believe we need to look out for the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. Sometimes I think, and this is more of a legislative issue up in Sacramento, that sometimes over-engineering is done to address a problem that might be perceived. And like I said, while I realize it might be attached to some grant funding that is needed for other things, that this is piggybacks on, hey, we need to get into Class 4 bike lanes. Some of these pictures here, I grew up a block away from this intersection, and this bike lane at Studebaker and Wardlow in the city of Long Beach is being removed because that was grant funding to move that 3 blocks to say, hey, what would this look like? And what they're finding is it's more costly now, and the city's having to pay for when a distracted driver runs into one of these things. And rather than there's a arterial road right next to it with a median that the bicyclists are riding in. As you can see, that pickup truck is parked there, so that's where the bicyclists go. So I appreciate what I believe the state is trying to do in order to make a more walkable and rideable community. I would think that in Eastville, like Commissioner to my right here said, the attention around schools is necessary. As we can see in some of these statistics, Scholar Way keeps coming up, but I don't know that our goal will ultimately be, and I know it's going to be a slow phase out, is to have people ride their bikes to work. Because I think if we did a study of our population, most everyone's commuting somewhere by car and not by bike or rail.
Commissioner Wall, anything? Very detailed report. I want to say thank you for enlightening more of the encompassing what complete streets are all about, including the presentation afterward. I concur. I think safety around the schools is definitely key, especially in the Scholar Way area. And I know that you can't, educating and enforcement, it works to some degree, but I think distractions are totally what the nuisance is today. In this day and age, I see bicyclists riding on their cell phones as much as I see drivers doing the same. And I just think we're becoming more a distracted society today than we were yesteryear. So until that can be dealt with, that element eliminated, we'll have safer streets regardless of the fact. That's all I have.
Oh, Christian, I have one more. One of the things that reports that like this do not capture are sometimes things that are doing right because we don't have we have lesser injuries because of it. For instance, like Riverwalk Parkway, we have a lot of kids that ride along Riverwalk Parkway, do not get into accidents, don't get hit by cars because our planning is our city planning has created a pathway in which they can ride to school uninterrupted. So I think those are some of the good things that we have here in the city, which help to keep our numbers low. And they don't ever get quantified because they're not an accident. So I think as long as when we look at further developments, if we look at that, I think we're going to remain in good standing, because I think we've done a pretty good job of that as a city so far. And I think that really helps. Thank you.
Joe, you were going to say something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I apologize for my rasp voice here. I just want to thank you for the comments, Commissioner. Also, thank you, Craig, for taking the lead on this report. This report is actually initiated by OTS because the state wanted to promote all these complete streets throughout the state. So they said, we give you some money and we don't have to do anything, just provide us information and available some people, police and sheriff department to meet with us so we can review your conditions. So we provide all the information to them and they would generate this report that you have. So I understand that this is not cookie cutter and then that not applies to all communities. So I appreciate the comments. However, we use, when our planning the CIP projects year by year, we use any tools that we can have in our hands to planning accordingly. We apply for grants. Number one is for safety, for bicycle, for schools, the radar speed signs, the counter, the pedestrian counter crossings, and all those things are geared towards safety around the school for the communities. That's what we are gearing for, and continually to be on top of this. And I'm glad that Craig mentioned that this is not a recommendation, it's just a suggestion. And there's a toolbox, and like this is our toolbox, so we can look at it. Hey, what does study say about this wide streets that we have? We have inherited these wide streets in Eastvale from the county. Mm-hmm. If this is per our engineering and planning right now, some of the streets are too wide that we have, and there's a boulevard for racetrack for people, and this is unsafe. So we're trying to look for ways how we can reduce the maintenance costs, because when we have to resurface a street 110 feet from curb to curb, is a lot of asphalt to resurface, whether slurry seal or fix. So we try to reduce the number of lanes if possible because of the volume of the traffic. We're also trying to stripe certain areas to add to the bike lane to that. But we are tight because the budget is so much, we don't have the money that we can to use that. We apply for grant, SB 821. Our grant is very good, very well written, $1.2 million. We got denied by the RCTC and SCAG because we are not disadvantaged community. These grants, most of the grants in RCTC and SCAG was written specifically for disadvantaged communities, so we are not. We are thankful that we are not because our economic level is higher, one of the highest here. But at the same time, when we apply for grants, we're always at disadvantage. Mm-hmm. Right from the bat, we got minus point already from all our reports. So our contacts at the RCTC and SCAG is trying to work to change the rule. Hopefully in the next few years, we're going to be able to get the grant. When we get the grant, all these wide streets, we have a plan for Harrison, we have a plan for 65th, we have a plan for some of the streets to have the bike lane, dedicated bike lane, so kids can walk, can ride a bike safely to school, and people who want to walk, to ride a bike to work or in the communities, to improve that and to promote that. And I just want to add one more here. We have on the list, number one, accident is Scholar at 68, and we are going to have a traffic signal as part of the East-Tem project. It's been identified as a location, intersection that we're going to have traffic signals, in addition to Baltimore and Scholar. Commissioner Dinko, you asked a question earlier. And these two signals are going to be added. And in conjunction also, just want to highlight that because there was places number one of the accident. So we're going to have the traffic signal there. And in the near, hopefully within the next year or so, we're going to have all the crosswalks along the safe route to school. We're going to have a yellow color with the 3/4, we call it. So it's like a solid yellow crossing the sidewalk, crossing the streets. And we have about like 50 locations that we're going to add. And we are adding this as the project, a CIP project comes along. so we don't have to spend just specifically the money that we have. So when we have slurry seal project, we include that crosswalk allocations to be added to the project, so to lessen the impact on our budget. So those are information I'd like to share, but these tools are very, very useful and valuable for us in the future when we plan our CIP projects. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joe. As we were discussing this and looking over the agenda, I was reminded of the Schleißman and Cedar Creek traffic report, and I failed to ask you about that. So while we're on the discussion of intersections, I segue back to item 3.1A. 3.2A, forgive me.
So after the recent cluster that we had in October and the beginning of November, we were asked to take a look at that intersection, work with the city traffic engineers, see if there was any issues or concerns. So going back 3 years, looking at that intersection and the collisions that we've had there, in 2015 we had 5 collisions. They were kind of spread out, one in March, one in June, one in July, one in August and October. 2016 we had no collisions at that intersection, so we went a whole year with no collisions. And then in 2017 we had one in March, and then the cluster that we had was October 6th, October 31st, and then November 1st. So we had like a 3 cluster collision there in about 3 weeks. So just kind of looking at all the stats, looking at the collisions, the primary collisions factors. None of the collisions that we've had there were fatalities, although 67% of them did result in some injury, which could be from anything from complaint of pain to broken bones. No major injury collisions. All these TCs were caused by driver error. 44% of these were due to stop sign violations. 44% were due to speed violations, and 12% were due to failure to yield. It was almost a 50-50 split between nighttime and daytime collisions, and there's really no pattern to the day of the week or the month. The recent cluster there appears to be an anomaly. There's no real pattern or nexus to link any of them together. So we went out, kind of assessed the scene with Joe and his team. There were some issues that we saw there, minor issues. There were a couple electric utility boxes that are above ground that are on Schleißman. So whether you're coming out of southbound Cedar Creek or northbound Cedar Creek, there are obstructions to the west. There were a couple shrubs that were a little bit overgrown as well, again on Cedar Creek. To the east and west there, those have since been cut back, and some of them it looks like have been taken out. I went by there last night, so it looks like that's been dealt with. The electrical utility boxes, I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot that can be done with those. I'm guessing that the expense is going to be quite high, and there's going to be some red tape to go through to move those underground if it's even possible. The speed on that roadway is 45, which seems appropriate for the roadway and the traffic conditions. We did notice an issue with one of the stop signs, which was set back a little far from the limit line, so we suggested that be pushed up a little bit. It's been done already, so that's been solved. And then we maybe suggested looking at some additional signage on Cedar Creek on both the north and south side, just letting those drivers at those stop signs know that the cross traffic doesn't stop. So it seems like some of the issue is people come up to the stop sign and then they just pull out onto Schleißman, and that traffic isn't stopping. So most of those issues are easily dealt with. A few of the electrical box issues are a little more difficult, but overall we don't see a major problem. We don't see a pattern there. It's mostly just driver error that's causing these things. In fact, the one on the 31st was probably one of the more serious ones, and that was just resulting from somebody pulling out a right-of-way issue. The one that occurred the next day was actually a result of the construction that was going on to fix the pole. So on the 31st, the pole got damaged. The next day, Crew came out to fix it, and as the crew was up in their bucket, somebody was gazing up at them to see what they were doing, and they ran into another car. So really no pattern or major red flags that we see at this point.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Chairman, I did have actually one question for 3.4. We can go back to that.
Back to the complete streets safety assessment. Is it for Craig or for Joe?
Joe or Craig, or actually just in general. It's just a general question. So, seeing that the bicyclist less than 15 years old is the problem, is there the opportunity for the schools to kind of take the lead on that and provide some sort of education to the students? I mean, it probably is being done, but that's something that we should maybe look at, or?
Yeah, it's been done, and we continue to promote this, we continue to talk to the school. Just for information, Commission, we have a quarterly meeting with the school district, and our team, city manager attends, and council member attends, and also a sheriff department, and pretty much all layers of the school. And we continue to remind them education is very important, and they have to, our sheriff department is always available to come and do the education at the back to school night, for example, like that. And that has always been promoted. And we have, Ms. Neeson maybe want to add a little bit more. We have developed a little guidelines, the trifold guideline of the school safety. And that's been, I should, maybe I'm selfish by saying this, I think we are promoting this one here. And this, the city of Eastvale and the leadership of Ms. Neeson has been very strong in promoting this, working with the school district and developing a lot of issues and continue to discuss these issues. And yes, it's been, and we're going to continue to bring that up to them.
Commissioner Wald, to your point, we have made a significant emphasis on things like International Walk to School Day and creating maps per school site, large format maps per school site that show gosh, a 1 mile, or sorry, I think a 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute radius around the school sites. We listened to feedback from parents saying, well, you know, I'm not comfortable with my child walking to school. I don't know my neighbors, or I don't want them walking alone. So we've done a lot of things to get the school sites, given them a lot of content, a lot of resources to try to get them to help us educate the children, because we're not in charge of running the schools, but a lot of partnership and collaboration, but it does require funding, and that is something that we've historically been a little short on. So we're using some more creative solutions with the large format maps and passing out that information to parents during back to school season. All the school sites should still have that content posted on their website, and it is also on ours. We've also partnered with the school district, sheriff's department, and Corona Police Department to create a brochure that talks about bicycle and pedestrian safety. That is sent out through the school district's Blackboard to every single parent of all the elementary schools and intermediate school children. And that goes out a couple times a year for citizens that are also registered to receive the school district's newsletter. It is prominently featured in their newsletter, every single issue. And it is also sent out from City Hall and posted on our website as well. So we're trying to tackle this from multiple angles. But the biggest noticeable thing that you will see is, I mean, take a look at International Walk to School Day. You get the cars off the road, and it's a tremendous difference. We are the only city in Riverside County that gets 100% participation every year from our school sites. It makes a difference, but getting the parents to take that step, to make that commitment regular, and do it, you know, a couple times a week or a couple of days out of the month, that's where there's a disconnect. Getting people to change their habits is the hardest. hardest component of tackling this issue. We've had bicycle rodeos. Commissioner DaCosta has worked those events with us. So we're just going to keep trying to do everything that we can do to reach people, but this isn't going to be popular, but you know, we need our parents. We need our parents to start this at home, to help us start this at home, and get their kids to commit to paying attention to the rules of the road and wearing their helmets. And you know, we can only do so much from an engineering standpoint, from an enforcement standpoint, from an education. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. We need this to also be a partnership with the parents and get them to do their part. So we'll keep plugging away. Hopefully, at some point we can deploy some resources into the school sites and do presentations in the multipurpose room. Those kind of efforts are very, very impactful. But that's something we'll have to look at as funding becomes available.
Perfect. Thank you for the information.
Thank you. Item 3.5, truck route study update.
A short update, Commissioners. We're in the process of, we've included what's called the terminal truck route as part of the truck route ordinance. The terminal truck route involves oversized trucks that are greater than 65 feet in length. There's a process we're going through. The terminal truck route that we're including is Cantu Galliano to Goodman, then Goodman, where it comes down and circles back to Hamner Avenue, north on Hamner to Cantu Galliano and back to the freeway. Well, our portion's fairly simple. The geometry works really well. The Caltrans portion getting off Cantu, the engineering firm for Goodman has applied for an exception with Caltrans for it to be fully utilized as a terminal truck route, and it's taking time to get that approved. Trucks can use the center lane and the turning movements work fine. So if we don't get quick approval, we may use that as the argument, as long as we can get a letter from Caltrans stating such. It can be a terminal truck route as long as the truckers use the center lane for the turning movements. So it's really just a process. I would expect our next meeting with this commission, we'll be bringing the ordinance in its completed form back to you, and then on to Planning Commission and to the City Council for approval.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Chairperson DaCosta, there's one item that I would like to actually add to the agenda here as a presentation that we overlooked to add. So I would like to request the Commission to add item 3.6 under presentations for introduction of our communication specialist. Sorry, had a moment there. Our communication specialist, Olivia Applegate.
All right.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
Do we have to take a vote for that?
Yes, please.
All right.
Okay.
I move to add 3.6, the introduction of our new communication specialist.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Commissioner Dinko?
Aye.
Commissioner Wall?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Vice Chair Parilla?
Aye.
Chair DaCosta?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the Commission to Olivia Applegate. Ms. Applegate here is our new communications specialist, and she comes to us from the city of Chino. Prior to her employment with the city of Eastvale, she worked in the city of Chino for the Chino Police Department from November of 2010 to November of 2017, where she served as their crime prevention specialist. Throughout her employment with the city of Chino, Olivia has been part of several major outreach and education projects, including outreach and education prevention program that the Chino Police Department provided to the community. Some of these include a youth academy, citizens academy, Neighborhood Watch, National Night Out, Red Ribbon Week every 15 minutes, the Explorer program, the crime prevention through environmental design, crime-free multi-housing program, and many others. She also serves as a member, she has served as a member of the Chino PD social media team, where she assisted in communicating information to the public and media upon request. I'm a stalker on the Chino PD social media, and I've always been very impressed, so I'm happy to have her on board. She is currently pursuing her bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Arts in Communications, and intends to pursue her Master of Public Administration thereafter. Olivia resides in the city of Upland with her husband, and we're really excited to have her on board and have some more resources in City Hall so that we can give poor Aaliyah a break here a little bit and push out some more of these initiatives from the Commission and Council. So with that, I'd like to welcome Olivia to the Eastvale team. We're very excited to have her, and if you have any questions.
Welcome, Mrs. Applegate.
Did you want to say a few words? Put you on the hot seat.
It's on.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm coming down with something I think I'm a bit sick. My name's Olivia, and I am just as excited to join the City of Eastvale. They're an amazing team. This is my second day. I started yesterday. I've already learned so much thanks to Aaliyah, and it's been baptism by fire, which has been great. And I'm just excited to be a part of the City of Eastvale. I also have stalked the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and social media platforms of Eastvale, and just been so excited to be a part of that. And I am very passionate about crime prevention still, and law enforcement will always be near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited to be a part of these meetings in the future. If there's anything that I can help you with and assist with, please let me know. I am happy to be here and be a part of this.
Awesome. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, the consent calendar. A motion will be in order to accept all items on the consent calendar at this time.
Motion to accept the consent calendar items.
Second.
Commissioner Dinko,
Aye.
Commissioner Wall,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Vice Chair Parilla,
Aye.
Chair DaCosta.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to item 5.1, discussing law enforcement services between City of Eastvale, the County of Riverside on behalf of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department.
Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. This item was brought before you this evening at the suggestion of the City Council. This initially was slated for the City Council agenda at their last meeting, and we decided to not have them hear the item and to pull it and bring it back to the Public Safety Commission for your review and input, and to provide recommendations to the City Council. So to give you an overview, upon incorporation, the City of Eastvale contracted with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department for law enforcement services. So we are a contract city. We do not have our own police department. Since incorporation, the city has maintained this agreement for contract services, and we've amended the agreement from time to time, at one time including an additional 10 hours, another time to include a dedicated motor officer or dedicated traffic officers or CSOs, etc. As set forth in the terms of our agreement, we do have, if we're going to change any staffing levels, we do have to amend our contract. The contract would have to go before the County Board of Supervisors for ratification, and due to some shortages countywide for police services, there is a potential for this to take up to a year to fill any of these positions that we may consider. So what I would like to do is just touch on a few things and then kind of turn this over to Captain Hedge to provide you a PowerPoint. But some of the things to take into consideration is that we already adopted our fiscal year budget for 17-18. That's done at the end of June, and it becomes effective July 1st. What I am proposing this evening is to amend our contract potentially based upon your recommendations to the City Council to increase certain staff positions for law enforcement. I'd like the Commission to keep in mind that this is not the only staffing increases that we are looking at. We are a young city, but we only have 10 people at City Hall, and we have a population of 65,000 residents. So we are getting a lot done with 10 full-time employees. Myself is one of those 10. We have a couple of part-time employees, and we have several contract positions. But on a good day, if we were to get everybody at City Hall, that Public Works, planning, we might have 30 people, and those are the folks that are kind of the magic behind the curtain, if you will, that are making everything happen. So we've been notoriously short-staffed in everything: police, fire, City Hall. So what this would be is a amendment to the Sheriff's Department contract potentially. It would also be an amendment, a mid-year budget adjustment for fiscal year 17-18. Although any increase in staffing for the Sheriff's Department, the costs would not be incurred until the position is filled. So if it takes up to a year to recruit, train, and deploy, then we don't start incurring costs until the position is filled. I'm going to turn this over briefly to Captain Hedge to give you the update, but one of the reasons that we are able to consider this mid-year budget adjustment and amendment to the contract is that with the passage of SB 130, that's Senate Bill 130, initiated by Senator Roth and Assemblywoman Sabrina Cervantes, we were successful to have our VLF fee revenue returned. Now, that does not mean that we're getting back all the money that we have lost over the last 7 years, which is now $19.3 million since incorporation to present. But we have been promised that we would get our fair share of vehicle license fee revenue moving forward. That is a biannual payment. It follows property taxes. And so the total amount that we are projected to receive in VLF revenue is $4.3 million.
That's per year, Michelle?
I'm sorry?
That's per year?
Yes, sir, that's per year. But it is broken into 2 payments, and those payments are made biannually following the property taxes. So the Auditor Controller's Office has indicated that our first 50%, if you will, of that total should be delivered to the city of Eastvale on the end of January of 2018, at which time we would be suggesting a mid-year budget adjustment. That is the only way that we are able to do this. Without those VLF dollars, everything has to remain status quo because we just don't have the funds. And it's you don't want to increase funding and then, or increase staffing and then take it away a year later. It's better to make incremental budget changes that are sustainable as our other sources of revenue increase, such as sales tax revenue or development fees, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Captain Hedge and go through his PowerPoint presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Chair DaCosta, members of the Public Safety, thank you for allowing me to do this presentation. The city and the Sheriff's Department have enjoyed a partnership providing full law enforcement services to the city since the incorporation in 2010. And we consider ourselves the Eastvale Police Department. So you may hear us say sheriff's deputies or the Sheriff's Department. We are your police department, and we consider ourselves your police department. Since the city's incorporation, the Sheriff's Department and the city have regularly evaluated the law enforcement contract, and police service needs to provide for the safety of the community, the residents, and the visitors that come to the city. As a result, needed services like have been described have increased over the years based on various reasons. This has included an increase in population, increase in visitors who patron our businesses, increased reported crimes, increased traffic collisions, and our increased community involvement. This presentation will include a brief overview of current police staffing, overall statistics and response, and several alternatives for increased police staffing. Our contracted staffing is basically separated into two categories: patrol fully supported contract hours and dedicated positions. Patrol staffing is calculated using the fully supported patrol baseline rate. I don't want to go too much into contract training because we could always provide that. However, the fully supported patrol baseline rate, which is currently $168 per hour, it includes supplies, services for patrol deputies, and that cost also includes direct support of lieutenants, sergeants, and investigators, their indirect support, sheriff service officers, and clerical staff, our dispatch center, information services bureau, and our accounting and finance. Patrol hours, or the baseline rate, is billed by productive hours of 1,780 hours. What that is that's the estimated net number of annual hours for a sworn deputy who works throughout the year after any absences of leave taken. If he takes vacation, if he's ill, the average is about 1,780 hours for the billing. These patrol services are contracted by hours, not position. The city currently contracts for 90 patrol hours, which equates to 18 deputies who are scheduled to patrol 24 hours per day throughout the city. With the contracted rate for patrol, if a deputy is off for any reason, whether he's sick, vacation, if he's in training, we still staff the contracted hours to fulfill the 90-hour obligation. So we always draw from other resources in order to meet that obligation. Currently, the police department staffs 3 10-hour shifts with fully supported patrol positions, which equates to 9 deputies per day. Dedicated positions such as motor officers or other personnel assigned full-time to provide specific service to the city are billed at 2,080 hours, currently at $144.16 per hour. The contract pays for all compensated hours associated with dedicated personnel, whether they report for work, whether they use sick time or vacation time, and they're not backfilled any type of, if they're absent as of the patrol rate. And these positions that are dedicated are positions that specifically work for the city. They don't go into any other areas. If for any reason they do, you don't get billed for that. In addition to the 90 fully supported patrol hours that we currently have, the city contracts for 7 dedicated positions who are assigned only to the city. So the city currently has 2 deputies assigned to the special enforcement team who provide community-oriented policing and targeted enforcement, and those are 2 deputies that are assigned specifically to the city of Eastvale. 3 deputies assigned to the traffic bureau, 2 are sworn traffic officers, and 1 is a sworn motor officer. And their primary responsibilities are enforcement of traffic, conducting traffic investigation and education for traffic, as was described earlier, for the schools and for the citizens and the community members. The city also has 2 community service officers who are assigned to the Traffic Bureau, who are trained to conduct advanced traffic collision investigations. In addition, they enforce parking violations and help alleviate some of the tasks from the sworn deputies to free them up to conduct proactive traffic enforcement. So we have 2 non-sworn CSOs, community service officers, currently in our Traffic Bureau who essentially do the same work as a deputy other than anything related to law enforcement or suspect contact. This slide here represents the increase in population and how it correlated with the yearly increase in calls for police service, along with the police and the fiscal year police budget. As you can see, we projected for 2017, calls for service will increase from about 31,234 in 2016 to about 32,000 in 2017. The budget increases that you see on the right were primarily as a result of increased sheriff's rates throughout the years. In addition, the Uniform Crime Reporting Part 1 crimes, which are UCR crimes, have continued to increase from a total of 945 in 2015, 1,347 in 2016, and 1,073 year-to-date as of this last September of this year. And the Part 1 crimes that we track are specific crimes reported to the FBI for statistical purposes. This includes violent crimes such as homicides, robberies, and assaults, and also property crimes such as burglaries, larceny, and motor vehicle thefts. When you look at the numbers compared to the last few years and by experience, there appears to be a direct correlation with the noticeable increase in crime and the implementation of Proposition 47, AB 109, and also realignment for the jails. These essentially reduced penalties for what used to be serious crimes, and basically instead of housing in state prison, now a lot of them house in county jail. And I know for Riverside County, we have 5 jails, and we have 3,900 beds in those 5 jails right now, and we book about 50,000 inmates a year. And so those that remain in the jails, we try to get them alternative programs. We try to get them released on, we call it the bracelet program. It's where we monitor them. However, still, because of the federal government, we still have Fed kicks, we call it. So basically, we end up releasing the best of the worst at times throughout the year. Since 2011, we've released about 40,000 inmates. So I like looking at those numbers with the AB 109 and Prop 47, and I can see that there's a correlation between that and the increase in these stats. Patrol response times have slightly varied since 2015. However, as you can see, they've relatively remained the same. I think that is because we've systematically increased our staffing throughout the years, which let us remain where we need to be for our response times. Again, with the increased population and increased traffic throughout the city, traffic collisions have increased from 779 in 2015 to 829 in 2016. Year to date, we have had 609 collisions and project a slight decrease from the previous years if we trend as we are to probably around 710 by the end of the year. As you can see, enforcement has increased with 1,041 citations being issued in 2015 and increasing to over 4,000 year to date this year alone. I believe that enforcement was possibly impacted in late 2015 when the cities contracted to hire a motor officer, and he began his traffic enforcement throughout the community. Now, I would like to begin discussing the various staffing alternatives to increase police productivity. The first alternative would be increasing patrol hours from the current 90 hours per day for patrol to 100 hours per day. This would increase the patrol budget by just under $615,000 and would equate to 2 additional deputies for 7 days a week coverage. So if we added 10 hours a day for patrol, it would equate to about 2 deputies, and that would give us additional deputies throughout the week. The benefits, we see additional field response, having the additional deputies out in the field, with the hope of reducing the response times that we have, a higher visibility with additional black and whites out in the field, with the intent of lowering crime, and the ability to increase our community involvement. The second alternative would be to increase our motor position from 1 to 2 dedicated motor officers. This would increase the police budget by about $356,000 for the first year, a little over that. This would include the purchase of a fully equipped law enforcement motorcycle, reoccurring costs such as fuel and vehicle maintenance, and one-time purchases such as safety equipment, training, and electronic citation equipment. After the first year and the initial purchases, the reoccurring deputy and equipment costs would be about a little over $307,000 yearly. And the benefit to having an additional motor would be additional field resources, increased traffic enforcement, hopefully reducing traffic collisions, higher visibility out in the field, and increased community involvement in public relations. The third alternative that we looked at would be adding an additional dedicated sworn traffic officer instead of a motor officer. This would be a deputy enforcing traffic violations in a black and white patrol vehicle. We currently have 2 sworn traffic officers assigned to the Traffic Bureau who all of the enforced traffic violations, also spend time responding and conducting traffic collision investigations. So although we have, well, and I guess you could say that our motor officer also handles those. If there's not a traffic unit on and we investigator on and we have a motor on, most of the time he will handle the traffic collision investigation, so a patrol unit wouldn't have to. The increase for this would essentially be the same as a motor officer when it comes to the staffing and personnel costs, because they're both dedicated deputies. So it'd be just under $300,000. And then with an increase in mileage, since we charge mileage for the black and white unit, it'd be a little over $307,000. And the benefits for a sworn traffic officer would be the reduced startup costs compared to a motor officer for the initial first year, additional field response, increased traffic enforcement, reduced traffic collisions, higher visibility, and an increased community involvement. Now the fourth alternative we looked at would be contracting for a dedicated community service officer. Right now, the city of Eastvale does not have a dedicated community service officer assigned to patrol. The 2 community service officers they have are assigned to the Traffic Bureau. This would be a non-sworn position whose primary responsibility would be to respond to low priority calls for service, such as calls without suspect information or without suspect contact, such as past thefts or past burglaries to where there is no suspect information. In addition, they would transport prisoners for the deputies, so the deputies would be able to remain within the community instead of having to go to the jail, or if it's a mentally disturbed person, going to get them evaluated. The only issue with this is that it has limited flexibility since it is a non-sworn position assigned to patrol. So they would not be responding to any in-progress calls or anything that's related to a suspect, such as a sworn deputy would be going to. This would increase the budget probably about $114,000, a little less than $115,000, and a little bit less than $122,000 with mileage costs for the additional vehicle that they would need. And the benefits that we attribute to this position would be an additional field response. They would be able to handle non-priority calls, which in fact would reduce the deputies' patrol response times because that would be calls that they would not have to respond to. They would be able to transport prisoners, which in turn will give the deputies the ability to remain in the community to handle additional calls or for high visibility. The additional black and white in the field itself would be higher visibility, and we would be able to increase our community involvement. And after careful consideration, our staff's recommendation would be to increase patrol with the additional 10 hours and add one additional motor officer. This will provide the flexibility of a sworn deputy positions and impact crime and also impact the traffic issues within the community. And this would increase the budget probably about $971,000 and increase your police department staffing by 3 sworn deputies. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a lot of questions, but you guys can go first.
Commissioner Wall?
Oh, I get to go first? You may have covered it, and I apologize if I'm asking something you touched on, but the difference between the motor and then the sworn officer as far as for traffic, is it just literally the car? I mean, I get there's a difference in startup costs, but as far as what they do, the benefit, the impact they'd have on the ground, would it be the same? Is that a safe assumption?
Well, I think that statistics show that a motor officer has the better capabilities to handle traffic enforcement. That's why most communities have them, because their abilities to enter traffic or to not be seen, I guess you can say. However, the actual costs for the 2 positions are relatively the same. The second and third year are pretty much the same also, because once you get beyond that initial cost, you have the upkeep of the motor and equipment.
Sure.
However, for the vehicle, now you're paying a mileage cost, and I believe like it's 85 or 89 cents a mile right now. So you would be paying that for the black and white vehicle.
Okay. And then with regard to the training, it was mentioned that there's kind of like a backlog for personnel. So are these the cost associated with the different personnel types for a rookie, just to say, is there like, and I don't mean to sound cheap, like a discount because you have a non-seasoned personnel, or it's just a flat across the board if they had 20 years and they had 1 year? Is that?
Yeah, the training is the same and the cost is the same. However, one thing to realize is that although it takes, as an example, a year to be able to fill these requests, you most likely would not be getting a candidate straight out of the jail. I'm sorry, straight out of the academy. Sure. You would get okay. You would get somebody who has either been around for a while and he's coming out of another out of the jail as a deputy. That's what I was thinking, or somebody from another facility, another station. And then the new cadet would either go into the court or they'd go into the jail to work as a deputy.
Okay. So you're kind of replenishing a rank and then you're getting
Yeah, so
someone else.
you most likely would not get a green deputy. You'd get maybe somebody with a little less experience than somebody who's been around if they came from the jail.
Okay.
However, you would not get somebody that we just hired.
Okay.
They would be backfilling that position.
And you guys will have to excuse me. I have no law enforcement experience.
That's all right. That's all right.
I probably asked to step.
They're all good questions.
I already know that.
They're all good questions.
So with regards to the 10 hours, it's the equivalent of 2 bodies. Will it physically be 2 bodies, or is it just like a reference, like you're using equivalent?
It would be physically 2 bodies to fill those 10 hours and to fill both halves of the week. So it would be, that would be, equate to 2 physical bodies.
Okay.
Commissioners, for the benefit of the public, I wanted to explain something real quick. Looking back at some of the slides, I wanted to make sure that it's understood that that's a fully burdened rate, which means that it is inclusive of training, it's inclusive of medical benefits, it's retirement, vacation. I mean, it's everything, including support staff costs, which are blended into this rate. So the reason I bring this up is because every time we discuss Sheriff's Department contract and rates, we start hearing citizens say, oh my gosh, I can't believe a police officer makes $168 an hour. That is not accurate. That is not what they're making, but that is the cost of having that position when you add in all of the benefits and all of the county resources that go into providing that person to us. So that's the training, that's recruitment, that's administrative staff, et cetera. So it's a fully burdened rate.
Thank you.
I think that's it for me for now. You guys will probably ask something I'll touch on, but I wanted to thank you for the presentation. Both, it was very informative. It's a lot of information to take in, and I'm sure you guys will probably do more of the heavy lifting than me. But thank you.
Those are great questions. Yeah. The overview is outstanding, sir. As I look at it, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's no way we can possibly look at this in one night and come to any kind of conclusion or decision. I don't think anyone's that sharp or that fast. Maybe a couple of my colleagues to the right, they're pretty sharp. But as I look at it, and speaking from experience, about 28 years in law enforcement, I can tell you this.
Bless you.
As a city, you don't want to get caught behind where you're trying to catch up. And so something has to be decided relative to having more law enforcement officers. What the particular rate is, 1 to 2, 1 motor to 2 officers, that has to be looked at. But I can honestly say that you don't want to get caught trying to catch up, because if you do, you'll never, ever catch up, and the crime rate will start to increase. One thing that I've noticed is that our neighbors to the north of us, Ontario, they're doing a lot of building there on Archibald. And all of those homes, once they're constructed, those people are going to be coming into Eastvale. A lot of them are going to do their shopping in Eastvale. And where communities grow, you're going to have crime rates that grow as well. So I'll be brief, and I think we have to make a decision. I would vote, if I were voting on this, to increase it by some form. But again, there was a lot to take in. What that form is right now, I'm not sure of. I'd have to read over it and reflect on it. That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Joe. Sean?
Yes. Couple of questions. Can you tell us what a priority 2 immediate response call is?
Yeah, well, let me start with the priorities. We typically have a priority 1 through 4 calls, priority calls. Priority 1 is life-threatening. Priority 1 is something that we urgently have to get to that location. Priority 2 is 1 step below that. I don't have the criteria which actually defines that. However, it is 1 step behind a priority 1 call. Then you go to the priority 3 calls, which is a past call. Might have some suspect information, could be a domestic. And then you have priority 4 calls, which are past calls that you have no suspect information. Somebody steals an item from your porch, and it's just going to pend until we handle the other calls. So priority 2 calls are one of the top calls that we go to, just right under priority 1.
Okay. And currently we're at about a 20-minute response time to those calls, from what I'm seeing here. We're projected to go down a little bit lower. And that's not something, that's something that an armed deputy would have to go to? Okay.
Yes.
Is it correct that the Board of Supervisors sets these rates? Is it the County Board of Supervisors that set these rates? Hourly rates, yearly?
Yeah, the rates are submitted and approved by the Board of Supervisors, correct?
And does that change every fiscal year?
It's reviewed every year based on the calculations that they use, including personnel rates, depending on contracts from the unions.
Okay.
That is probably one of the most significant impacts that we have on that rate. And just so you know that the rates that are charged by the Sheriff's Department are all cost neutral.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal for the Sheriff's Department to make any money off of a contract. So they are just recouping the cost that it takes for that deputy to go 10-8, basically, to go out in the field.
Okay. And I know, having lived here for some time and served on this commission for some time, that the city is in great hands with our city manager being fiscally conservative and responsible. And I know a lot of work has gone into this from the Sheriff's Department and the city. And I trust 100% that the city management and the Sheriff's Department, working hand in hand, is leading the citizens to the right conclusion and the right level of staffing. I would love to sit here and say we could have 1,000 hours. And I think I have seen, as many of you have seen, the small steps taken to get to where I think we need to be. Looking at the presentation earlier today on just our last month's stats, we had a 10% increase in calls for service, a 20% injury accident increase, a 32% 415 or music or disturbance, and 21% decrease in citations. That may be vacation or the motor officers, you know, that's fine. And we're small enough to say, hey, one guy is gone, he's responsible for 21% of the work, but that is a testament to how hard your officers and our officers are working, that by increasing a motor, we can possibly get 21% increase in citations, which could reduce our injury accidents back down 20%. So I think when we say we're making small steps here, we are, but those small steps have a positive impact and a great impact upon traffic. And I know we talked about burglaries and robberies and everyone, I mean, looking at social media, which I appreciate social media when it's directed appropriately by the city. But I have, and we all know social media gets out of hands where we have vigilantes out there running around and, hey, crime is running rampant on this part of town, or someone said that someone else broke into a house and I have a picture and the police aren't doing anything. And I think we have to discount those and look at these raw numbers into what you gentlemen are saying that we need. So I appreciate the recommendations that are being made. With that being said, and the 1-year lead time to train, I believe that a decision needs to be made. A decision based on those facts, and a decision based on the fact that the city, for the VLF funding that we were unjustly taken away over the last 7 years, I think we're righteously getting back. And out of that funding, as Michelle, you said, we're not throwing everything at police. We're not throwing everything at fire. We're not throwing everything. We're being very fiscally conservative and saying this is what we need. And I do believe that when people vent, or when people complain, or when people have righteous issues with policing, I think of two areas that always come up. Yeah, you know, there are robberies and burglaries, and that's there. But I believe that in the day-to-day life of a citizen of Eastvale, their issues are with traffic and with noise complaints, or with 415s. You call the police, and 20 minutes for a priority 2. What was it for a priority 3 or 4 or music? It's 37, 40 minutes. That, the reasonableness of that is neither here nor there. The fact is, if a citizen calls the police for the most important thing that's bugging them today, which is my neighbor's having a party, my 2-year-old's waking up, I got to get up at 6 in the morning, It's the most important thing, and the Eastvale Police Department is going to go address that. That combined with traffic. We hear it all the time. People are speeding on Archibald. People are crashing at this intersection. We had an item pulled out just for a specific intersection. So I believe addressing those problems through education is great, through enforcement is wonderful, or engineering is wonderful, but enforcement is a big key. People know where the motor officer sits, whatever city. People know that, hey, that motor officer was there yesterday, my friend got a ticket, that motor officer may be there tomorrow, I'm going to slow down. People know, hey, the police got here in a certain amount of time for my 4:15, my disturbance on my music. My neighbors saw that, they're not going to raise their music up. And I think that could be achieved through the added recommendations by 2 deputies, or the 10-hour equivalent of the deputy on the street as well as the motor officer. And I think taking that divided approach and not saying, hey, you know what, let's just address traffic. Let's not throw a couple extra people in there to put into another set team. I think taking those small approaches and putting that money into, or recommending that to council to go forward with that spending, and then we could look at staffing levels at a later date. But to say a later date, especially if we're 1 year behind and getting a person trained. And I remember I was here for the hiring of the first motor officer and put a motorcycle in here, and we were all excited about it, and we saw an immediate advantage. And people don't like to get tickets. I wrote tickets for 18 years working traffic enforcement, but people remember those tickets and people will slow down. And it's not just the tickets. That person could be out there educating. That motor officer's out there educating. That motor officers, I mean, if a priority 1 goes out and the motor officer is standing right there, he's not going to go away and say, hey, I'm the motor officer. He's going to engage. He's going to take care of that. And I believe that the recommendation made by the Sheriff's Department for 10 patrol hours plus 1 additional motor officer is, I'm prepared to support that recommendation towards council at this point. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sean. Christian.
Well, when I look at the increase in revenue from our VLFs, I'm happy to see that we have a problem where we need to find out where we want to spend the money, but I'm a little bit cautious because I do know that City Hall is short. And as our city grows, we're going to need to make sure that we're increasing staffing at City Hall. And I'm cautious not to recommend automatically adding a full complement of police officers that we may not be able to sustain in the future. Some of the questions I had with regard to our crime, and one of the statements from Kevin Hedge is if an officer goes, Eastvale officer or deputy goes to work a case in Harupa Valley, that we were not charged. I don't know how that would work. Is there some way that that's accounted for?
Yeah, we are, and that, I'll tell you right now, for a dedicated position, that rarely happens. That's usually more for patrol, because sometimes patrol will go back another unit up.
Yeah.
And then if it's anything over a certain amount of time, it's usually an hour, that hour automatically gets billed to the city that they're in.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and it's reciprocated the same way.
Okay.
So if somebody comes into Eastvale from one of the other neighborings, although we try not to do that, it does occur at times when there's a need for it.
I see. I noticed that with the increase in Part 1 crimes, that we have difficulty keeping them in jail, as we know, thanks to our legislators in Sacramento. So it doesn't seem as though we necessarily have a problem making the arrest, but keeping him in, which is hard for any of us to solve. But I do see that since we've added the traffic enforcement officer, we've increased our traffic tickets exponentially over the last 2 years, which is great. And it shows that he's actively working and making an impact, which is fantastic. What I'm a little bit more concerned about are still those other crimes those part ones, those two-level response crimes. When you have somebody in custody, we have more businesses in our city which are going to need additional police services. I'm a little bit more concerned that they get the police service, a proper response, than maybe adding more traffic enforcement. I'd like to see us approach this a little bit cautiously as a city and not spend too much on more law enforcement. I'd like to, I know this is coming up quick for me, but I'd like to see us explore other ways to impact crime, maybe with technology, with vehicle license plate readers, or a way we could sometimes make our officers more effective, because we can identify people with warrants coming into the city, stolen vehicles coming into the city, missing persons coming into the city, because those people that come into the city that have those outstanding wants or warrants sometimes don't necessarily live here. I'd like to see us invest in some of those technologies before we go automatically spend too much in law enforcement. I'm not saying I'm not willing to recommend additional police services. I'm a little bit cautious on the traffic side because I think we've made great gains. But I'm not sure if I would be ready to endorse 3 officers in 2018 or 2019 fiscal year completely. I'm not opposed to adding 10 more hours, but I don't know if I would want to add 10 more hours and additional traffic. I see some of the other possible recommendation options as a community service officer, and I think one of the questions I had, do your CSOs transport prisoners? I think you made mention of that.
Yes, they do.
That's something that's interesting to explore, because anytime there's an arrest in Eastville and we want to take him to jail, obviously you have to go downtown Riverside, which takes time away from the city. But I think I'm more inclined to get the full sworn than going with a community service officer, and rather, I think I'd rather see us spend the full amount for a deputy than a CSO who's only limited on what they can do. I think at the end of my monologue, I think what I would probably most be comfortable with, and I know we haven't come to really a close conclusion on what this panel is going to recommend. I think I'd be more inclined to recommend maybe 10 service hours without the traffic enforcement and start moderately before we spend too much money. I think 3 would be close to $1 million out of the budget annually, when we know we're getting $4 million in VLS. I mean, some of our big projects also come with big price tags, and I'm cautious about going too far into giving that much money to RSO for additional police services, when maybe we can use some of that money for other technologies to help us that we can hold within our city rather than spending them out. But that's where I'm at least with some of the questions I have. I don't know if we're close as a panel for a recommendation, but I don't know if any of the other commissioners have anything.
Commissioner Dinko, if I may comment on one of your suggestions about the license plate readers.
Yes.
That is actually something, a conversation that Captain Hedge and I initiated some 6 months ago. Unfortunately, the Sheriff's Department is in transition with their vendor. So they are going through the process right now of selecting another vendor. Until they make that selection, we can't opt in for that technology, but I am tracking with you, and that is definitely a request I've made of the Sheriff's Department, was pricing on having those devices placed on all of our units. I've offered to be the guinea pig, have our city be the guinea pig for testing of the product with their vendors. So right now, that is on our list, but we're just waiting for them to find a vendor that they will be utilizing department-wide.
Thank you. And I know they have some that go on police cars, but there are also options where you can have them fixed positions and put them on different locations and inlets to our city. With our city being still relatively small and only having maybe 6 major inlets into the city, we could really monitor what comes in and what goes out of the city effectively. I mean, there's a price tag with that, obviously. Bigger cities, it's hard because you have more inlets and outlets, but a city of our size, I think it's something that's doable. There's other cities that are small and same relative size where they've been very effective. They've been able to take their police officers and their deputies, depending on the city, and become very effective because they find directly people that are coming into the city that aren't with the best intentions, and we're able to snatch those up pretty quick. So I understand that Sheriff's Department is still looking at a vendor, but I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take for them to resolve what vendor they want to go with.
Yeah, like it was explained, it's been about 6 months since we had the first conversation, and I had a conversation with Sheriff's Administration in regards to the concerns that they had, one with the vendors that we had and the lack of service we were getting. Right now, the Sheriff's Department has one working ALPR vehicle. And there, as an example, when we first got ALPRs, the Hoopa Valley Station itself had 4 to 5, and now we don't have any. However, we are still in discussions, and we'll get an update on and see where we're at with it right now with the county.
Because I wonder if there's still not an option if we're talking about fixed positions as opposed to LPRs on vehicles, that as a city we may be able to get that contract independent of the Sheriff's Department as long as we pay for the installation of the software.
Yeah, I think that's something we'd have to look at, because I know the concerns that we would have is regards to the database that the information would be collected in, and the accessibility to that. I know that that's one of the big issues that we have when it comes to confidentiality. So in regards to a city partner having that, it could pose a lot of issues, something that we'd have to look into.
Well, as long as it's controlled by the Sheriff's Department but paid by another outside source, that's still doable. But
I agree with that.
But
yes.
I understand your position. The Sheriff's Department's still looking at a vendor long term. Hopefully we can figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dinkel and I had a conversation prior to the meeting, and I, along with him, were collectively coming up with options to discuss at this meeting with this presentation, specifically regarding other technological advancements that might be available from the Sheriff's Department to proper increase the enforcement, not just having another increase of officer into our budget, and knowing that we've already got these hours set because of our fiscal year adjustments that were made in July, and going into the new year with the VLF now being considered. That being said, looking at the various options, and as some of my colleagues have also stated, when a citizen calls the police, they would like a response. The response time has always been a questionable consideration for discussion at our Public Safety Commission meetings, at town hall meetings, but I think what's important to the citizens is knowing that officers are present and dealing with their need for officer presence. So that being said, there's various options here, and if I was to try and make light of all the available options, it's very hard to put a finger on which one specifically, because of the fact that they all tailor a need in some area of educating or enforcement, or just bringing awareness, or even that presence into the city because of uniformed personnel, a black and white car, a motor, just knowing that the police are present and thriving through Eastvale, doing what's necessary to enforce, engaging public safety in the community. It's hard to just say that we could go with technology all the time, but I know the next item discussing the pole-mounted cameras, and not aware whether or not license plate recognition is even considered a factor in those, but if the department was even able to monitor that, and the capability of being able to run things on the fly, run plates on the fly, so to speak, from that as an option. But that being said, looking at all of our options available, And while I'm from a smaller department, from previous history, and knowing we had a community service officer that was available to the community, that was a nice option. I'm glad you featured that in this packet and presentation. I don't know if that's necessarily the only route we should go, though, because we do need sworn personnel for the presence of being available to deal with whatever situation they're out on. And knowing that the station is not nearby and not desirous of putting anybody that's unarmed in harm's way, as officers seem to be under the attack, in my opinion, today. I would want to make sure that one is capable of handling themselves as well as protecting themselves should the need arise. So I guess with all I've said now, to narrow it down in conclusion, just having that patrol officer or the increase of the 2, as you've mentioned, is what I see necessary. But just being able to render these calls for service, when a person calls the police, they want that presence to be made known. And just to increase that in the city of Eastvale would be one of the strengths and consideration I would hope that our city council might go forth with. That's all I have. So, do we need to do anything further on this item for discussion?
This needs to go to council the 12th, right?
December 13th?
December 13th?
I think they're expecting some type of recommendation by this panel, I believe. I don't know if we had a consensus. Everybody had a different, slightly perspective on this.
Somewhat.
Well,
it's always easier when we're following exactly on the same line. But
exactly, but I'm just going to say it again. We've heard this since the city was incorporated. We need police officers. People come here, people say, we need police officers. We need commercial enforcement officers. We need 12 motor officers. We need, pole-mounted cameras. We need all these things, but, we need police officers here first. That's what I'm saying. We contract with the Sheriff's Department, and we, as Captain Hedges said, it is against the law. And doing police budgeting for the city that I'm currently employed with, we don't make money. We're not making money. They're not making money, and that's not the intent. Yeah. Police, because of retirements, because of anything, public service costs are rising. And with a 1-year lead time, I would be hesitant to go before the citizens and say, we're not voting to have more police. We're voting to and I know this has come by, but we're not the only commission that's looking at this right now. This has been worked through the Sheriff's Department, and I have 100% faith in our city leadership here that the money that we're getting in, based on the history of what I've seen since at least Michelle's been our city manager, has been spent conservatively and fiscally, and the city is, in my opinion, the most well-run city in the state. We are consistently being shown that we are one of the safest cities. And these deputies, honestly, are working their butts off. I can't imagine working a graveyard shift with one other officer in the city, or 2 other officers, or, hey, we got to go to Riverside to book this guy. I can't imagine that, because I came up in an agency where we had 1,100 officers, and if I got on the radio and said, I need help, 45 of them were coming at 2 in the morning in the middle of nowhere. And the crime rates in that city are significantly higher. We are doing more with less, and I think now that money is coming in, I mean, this could have been, we could have done this a year ago. There would have been no money. We've been crossing our fingers, but I think we see the money coming in, and for us to not go with a recommendation based on our police chief's experience and the sheriff's department behind that, to me would quite honestly be detrimental to us. I think the council needs a recommendation from us, and the council could do with that recommendation what the council would like to do, whatever they're going to do, and I'm sure there's going to be more heated discussion among the council on this, but I think for us not to have a recommendation either way would not fare well in the eyes of the public. So I'm reading here that discuss and provide recommendation. We should provide a recommendation, and the recommendation before us is the recommendation on the last slide was of an additional $971,427 for a motor officer and equipment and 10 patrol hours.
I know that the Sheriff's Department is in a significant budget shortfall, and although I appreciate the recommendations, I'm also hesitant to spend a whole quarter of our new budget on police services. I'd feel comfortable recommending those 10 additional hours, police service hours, which is equivalent to 2 deputies. I don't know if I would want to jump to 3. We can always increase that later, but it is harder to revoke that in the future. I think we've seen an increase in our traffic enforcement, and I think that's been great, but I don't know what the long-term benefit is going to be. You know, if he continues that enforcement effort and the level of service they provided, I think we might be okay. But I'm just hesitant to spend a full fourth of our increased budget on police services from my position. But I agree. I think we definitely need more deputies out there. I've had a call for service, and I had a no-show all night, and I wasn't happy with that. Nobody showed up at all.
And I have 2, and it was on a 415, and we discussed it with the prior administration and what we can do. And I respect that with traffic enforcement, but I honestly listen to the citizens, and people are speeding down such and such street. I would have a hard time saying we had an opportunity to hire a motor officer to address those needs, but we chose not to because we didn't want to spend the money that we had. I think traffic is a problem in our city. I think it is. We're a commuter city. And that's kind of what I was touching on with bike lanes. We're a commuter city here. Everyone drives on the roads. Our roads are too wide. People are speeding. People are avoiding the 91 and the 15. We're having a truck route, which is going to add traffic. Motor officers are a deputy on a motorcycle to get in and out. If there was an earthquake or a flood or the dam broke, and the motor officer's getting around. I mean, with $4 million, we have an opportunity to add 50 hours. I don't think we're doing that. I think we're adding 10 hours, which is the minimum we can add, and a motor officer to address that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, if 2 years down the line we look and say we don't really need a motor officer, we'd like to convert those hours into a deputy, is that something that could be done later on down the line?
Yeah, if we're not deleting the position, and we want to move that dedicated position into something else, that's something we'd be able to talk about. Now, we were talking about deleting the position, that would need formal notice, and it'd have to go to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, per the contract, yeah. When we incorporated, how many hours did we have? In 2010, how many patrol hours did we have?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have that data in front of me, but I will say that 2014-15 was 80 hours. I'm fairly certain we were at 80 hours.
I want to say that when we, during the first incorporation, it was 70 hours, I believe we were at.
And we're currently at
90 hours.
So we added 2 plus a motor officer, plus our dedicated set team and all that stuff. So without real numbers there, in 7 years, we've added 20 hours and a motor.
Yes, sir.
And we've grown in population?
About
Population
10,000?
population at incorporation was approximately 46,000.
And we're at?
And we are now 64,602 according to the California Department of Finance.
Okay, and with our build-outs and Goodman and all of that stuff that was not back there, we're looking at a increase, unless I'm wrong, of traffic coming into the city. The Limonite 15 interchange is slated to be when?
Construction is slated to begin in May, June of 18.
Of 18, which is going to have a significant impact on Limonite.
Yes, and you also have the I-15 express lanes that will be going on simultaneously. And then as soon as the I-15 interchange is complete, the Hamner Bridge widening and reconstruction will begin.
And for all these reasons, and the fact that our accidents went up 20% last month, and I don't know if the motor officer wasn't here or whatever, but went up 20% in 1 month. That's why I'm standing beside. I feel the need, and I think the numbers say we need another dedicated motor officer, in addition to a calls for service deputy.
Commissioners, I don't mean to complicate your decision, but if I could just share with you some of my thought process. The city has delivered a balanced budget every year since incorporation. We have moved money into reserves every year. We have lived on a very, very thin margin, and we have continued to do so because our philosophy at City Hall has really been to not, run up the credit cards and hope for the best. I mean, we've been very frugal. It's not uncommon for us to use coupons at City Hall for things that we need to purchase, and I mean that in all sincerity. But this is a recurring theme. Year over year is the complaint about lack of services, primarily from the citizens with regards to public safety. In our strategic plan, that is identified as our #1 priority. I think we have put our money where our mouth is because 70% of our budget is dedicated to public safety. Last budget season, I had to cut $600,000 from everywhere else in the budget to absorb the increases from Sheriff's Department contract increases, while not cutting staff and not cutting resources elsewhere. It's a bit of a game, Tetris, if you will, trying to deliver a balanced budget, not cutting services, and continuing to meet the demands of our citizens and doing it over and over with less and less. We are now at a situation where I did not include this $4.3 million into our fiscal year budget projections for 17-18 because I wanted certainty from the California Department of Finance. Here is what you're going to get and here's when you're going to get it. And until they gave me that statement, I was not going to take that as gospel, so this was not included in our budget. There are other cities that got some VLF dollars and they quickly threw that into their budget and started staffing up right away. I believe in taking an incremental approach and having the opportunity to course correct along the way. I do feel that this is an incremental approach. We're not talking about 20 hours. We're not talking about, a fleet of services. This is a baby step in my opinion. But it's a small step that I think can make a significant impact. To your point, yes, we have the Goodman Commerce Center project coming on board. that is going to not only generate additional traffic, but you're going to have additional shoppers. You've got a 45-acre retail component. You've got a Costco coming that's going to be opening its doors by November of next year. We are on the cusp of many things opening their doors here that are going to bring a lot more people into the city, which is going to create an additional drain on our already scant resources. I wouldn't be making this proposal to the commission if I didn't think we could handle it. I'm not in the business of overpromising and under-delivering, but this is a much needed step. We are already utilizing overtime to fill additional positions at the Sheriff's Department. We're already increasing patrols. I mean, citizens are continuing to complain, and ironically, they probably have more officers on the street than we've ever had before because of overtime that we are allotting. My concern is to not make a recommendation. We are kicking this can further down the road and thus continuing to extend our lack of services, which means that we are not going to be able to float these positions. The Sheriff's Department's not going to be able to float these positions, get people through the academy and backfill, which just means that that time horizon for having more resources is further down the road. Without a crystal ball, we do have some creative revenue coming in from sales tax generation that we're doing through economic development efforts. One of the items on the City Council's agenda is going to be a rate stabilization fund for those what I call one-time or short-term sales tax generations, so that next year we're not looking at, oh my gosh, the sky's falling, we have another increase, where am I going to come up with $600,000 so that I don't go into reserves? Because we have never gone into reserves. And I'd like to keep it that way. But I do think that the commission is at a place where, with some confidence, you could, at minimum, add 10 hours. And if the commission chooses to revisit other levels a few months from now, we can certainly do that. But my number one concern is, at minimum, adding 10 hours.
Michelle, I have a question. If tonight we don't decide to send this back to the City Council, and we table it to January the 1st, what's going to be the time frame from tabling it in January, I'm sorry, not January the 1st, but in the month of January, from then until now? I know someone mentioned it'll take about a year to train the officers up, a rough number. So if we table it for some time in January, and then the commission decides on it at their meeting in January, what would be the effective time frame that we've lost in not getting those officers?
That's a great question. So the commission, for the benefit of the public, the commission is dark in December. So you would take this to your next commission meeting in January, which is at the end of January.
Okay.
Which means that any recommendation that comes out of that meeting would not go to City Council until the first meeting of February.
Okay.
Then that, whatever that recommendation is, the Sheriff's Department would need to request a contract amendment, which would have to come back to the City Council members at a subsequent meeting for their approval.
Okay.
So you're looking maybe
March.
late February. Then it has to go to the Board of Supervisors to get on their agenda for their approval. So you're looking maybe late March before the Board of Supervisors would take any action. They won't make any plans for any additional staffing until they have that fully executed amended contract.
So 4 months, roughly.
So 4 months. I would say probably April 1st is when the contract
decision
would
will be made. And so then a year later would be 19, if we're going off that number, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Worst case scenario. I will, I like to be optimistic, but
Okay.
if I had to look at similar, when we added the motor officer, our motor officer, we were told it would be a year. City Council initiated the amendment and purchased all the equipment. I believe that was in April. And the motor position was actually operational by November. So it was 7 months. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that maybe things will happen faster than anticipated, but your worst case scenario, according to the Sheriff's Department, is a year.
Okay. Well, I've got a question. You know, it's always easy to say, well, we want more police officers. And so this recommendation is really a budgeting issue. And we're not really I'm not looking at a budget. I'm only looking at, do we want more police officers? Well, of course I want more police officers. Bring them on in. I mean, it's a feel-good question, but what I need to know is, can our budget handle it? There's nothing wrong with a city having reserves. That's how cities get through the up and down cycles of the economy. You always want to have a good set of reserves so you're not running into a budget shortfall. And sometimes you have to tap into it. Hopefully we don't have to in the future. But the economy is going to continue to go up and down. And so this is really kind of a budget question. And I saw the presentation by Captain Hedges, which I appreciate, but he also represents the Sheriff's Department. Mm-hmm. So what is more compelling to me, honestly, is, Michelle, your opinion. Because you see the budget, and I'm not seeing it. I've only seen the presentation by the Sheriff's Department. But until just now, I didn't really know what your position was, and that matters to me. Because you are looking at the budget, and you're being mindful of that. I don't have an opportunity to look at that. I'm not looking at our city budget, which I'd like to before I made a recommendation on spending a fourth of what our increase. Well, it could be more, obviously, with increased tax revenue, but at least a fourth of our VLF, without kind of knowing, are you comfortable with this? I kind of want to know, and I kind of get the feeling like your opinion is our budget can handle it, and if our budget can handle it, that matters to me, and so I really didn't get that feeling up until you had an opportunity to speak. I mean, if you feel like moving forward that we can handle 10 additional hours and a motor officer, then I'd like everybody else, I'd like to see more deputies in the city. I'd like a deputy to show up if I call him next time. So I feel like with your explaining your thought process, I feel like I have a better understanding kind of where we're at with our budget. And this is really a budget question. It really is. Everybody wants more deputies, but can we handle it? So I feel like, at least my position is, I feel like I would be willing to submit a recommendation for 10 additional hours in a traffic enforcement. I don't know how you guys feel on that.
You were going to say something, Michelle, please.
Yes, sir. So this is something that you're probably going to hear all over again as we prepare for the budget workshops, which will be a similar format as last year. For those that weren't part of the commission last year, we do have a page on the city's website that has the recordings, has the PowerPoints. We do kind of a budget overview, and then we have another workshop where we get into more nitty-gritty, and then we have a dedicated workshop to public safety before we deliver a draft and then final adoption. So we'll go through this again. You're making a very good point. There are so the city council's direction at the time of adopting the budget was, along with me, my recommendation was don't count your chickens before they're hatched, because show me the money. Yeah. And now we have a promise of funds coming in, and council had asked that when that should occur, that we bring this back for consideration. So here I am. But to also give you, I guess, a 30,000-foot overview of the things that are in my mind. You know, you have Costco coming on board. Costco estimate conservatively $1.1 million a year in sales tax generation. That is not their gross sales. That is actual sales tax generation. We do have an agreement with the developer, or reimbursement, sales tax reimbursement agreement, because we were in competition with another city to get those funds. But that is something that will be paid off.
But they're not moving. We'll get it eventually.
Yes. But it's the concept of, you know, giving up $1 to get 10, and you know, Costco will be here for 25 years, $1.1 million over a 25-year period. You can do the math, minus, you know, roughly $4 million for a sales tax sharing agreement with the developer. The return on investment is there. Then you also have Walmart, which is coming. That was approved by the city council. That project is moving forward. Once they break ground and start getting that project out of the ground, that Walmart location is estimated to generate about $600,000 a year in sales tax generation. Our Eastvale marketplace, where Smart and Final just opened, that was one of the top Smart and Final openings in the entire nation. That is one of their top producers in the nation, top 5. That shopping center is estimated conservatively to generate roughly $150,000 a year in sales tax generation. We have a hotel that's potentially looking to come into the city of Eastvale. TOT tax, that's transient occupancy tax, is the #1 source of revenue. If you don't have an auto dealership in your city, that's the kind of the cash cow. I'm proposing, since we don't have a hotel at this time, I am proposing to bring an initiative to the ballot to bump our TOT to be more competitive with the region. Right now we're under at 10%. We have thanks to our neighboring city of Norco, we have a fantastic sports tourism driver here in the area, Silver Lakes. I think we could do a 12% TOT, which just that 2% bump is an additional roughly $70,000 a year just from one hotel, a 120-room hotel. Now, if you look at the total TOT for one hotel, you're looking at roughly $400,000 a year from just one hotel, and that's our TOT. That doesn't go to the county where they get a piece of it or anyone else. So all of these things in totality are coming. Some of them are coming in the next 8 months. Some of them have a little bit longer time horizon. But my point in saying all this is that with VLF funds coming in and several of these initiatives that we're tackling at City Hall from an economic development standpoint, along with several financial obligations that were taken off of our plate. You know, the Limonite interchange, that was $48 million underfunded. We were going to have to come up with a local match. Now with the passage of SB 132 and SB 1, we don't have to worry about that project anymore. That is now off of our books and is going to be paid for. Same thing with the Hamner Bridge. You know, we were going to have to come up with roughly $3 million for that. These are, again, projects that are now taken off of our plate. Our local match obligation is taken off of our plate, which frees up the possibility for resources being allocated elsewhere. So, to answer your question, that was a long overview. I am comfortable with, at minimum, 10 hours.
Well, along with all those businesses are additional calls for service as well. So Walmart will generate that. Amazon will too, some. Costco will. So we should be prepared for that, you know, as well. So, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I feel comfortable initiating a motion for recommendation. I don't know, is the consensus is we feel comfortable with the recommendation?
Well, I was just going to ask the other side of the table.
I kind of want to get close.
You guys really took it to a whole nother level right now. So,
Having reviewed this, I'm comfortable with the recommendation that we do need additional hours, maybe 10. The 2 officers minus the minus the motor officer. I'm comfortable with that. Definitely additional officers, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the motor officer.
I think, having listened to everyone here and taking in even the information that Michelle shared with us at the previous meeting about the concern with the Santa Ana River bike trail and what that's going to potentially bring, Joe's comments about the surrounding development outside of our city that's going to bring traffic, and then everything even within, and the lead time that it takes to get somebody on, I would support the recommendation as it's written with the 10 hours and the motor patrol, knowing that we can make changes as we go along. Additionally, it sounds like that's not a far-fetched option to consider now. So that's my two cents on it.
So it boils down to me.
No pressure.
We're pretty close, though.
None.
We're pretty close. Kind of.
I would be outnumbered 3-2 right now if I was to go with just the additional 10 hours.
Well.
But having been on this commission with Commissioner Perea for some time and knowing the circumstances surrounding the commercial nature of traffic and its enforcement element, and knowing that he has been a traffic enforcement officer for the commercial element as well, I think I do agree with him in its entirety with the increase of the traffic motor officer also. I would go with the police budgeted recommendation of the 10 patrol hours plus the additional motor, simply because we do need an increased presence of patrol deputies to handle all those calls. And I would hope that the increase would be seen by the public, by the citizens, that they would get every call answered, responded to, and there wouldn't be any stale calls, that we might be able to respond even by a telephone call. But to add to that, with the influx of increased truck traffic, and if I might throw a personal element into this, from dealing with a commercial vehicle that's illegally parked on the other side in Chino of Chandler on a regular basis, just knowing that I wouldn't want that to be in my neighborhood, an eyesore, so to speak, from that element in the city of Eastvale, and just randomly parked trucks anywhere and everywhere. So I hope that we'll see what the ordinance entails with regard to truck parking, but I think an increase of the truck traffic will definitely need some element of enforcement and monitoring also for any stipulations regarding weight, length, and other items therein. So that being said, I guess I would go with the recommendation as well of the 10 patrol hours plus the additional motor officer. I think we
Should we
took
motion that?
Yeah.
Is that a motion?
Well, no, we don't all have to agree.
Make it? All right, I'll submit a motion to this panel. Approve the 10 additional deputy patrol hours along with an additional motor position for the city of Eastville, as recommended by the Sheriff's Department, Captain Hedges, as proposed.
And I would second that.
Commissioner Dinko?
Aye.
Commissioner Wall?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward?
Nay.
Vice Chair Perilla?
Aye.
Chair DaCosta?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Moving on to item 5.2, pole-mounted observation camera system update.
Chair DaCosta and Commissioners, this will be a short one. Pole-mounted cameras, a little bit of history. It's been a year since the cameras have been installed. To kind of give you a little bit of background on the cameras, these cameras are highly rated when we were looking at them. We have 3 cameras inside each box. There are actually 4 separate cameras that you can zoom in and manipulate, and so you can actually put them in an intersection and see all 4 orthogonal directions fairly easily. We have a camera located at Gateway and Limonite, one at Schleichman and Archibald, and we had one located at Citrus and Scholar until this past summer. We relocated it to Citrus just west of Hamner Avenue, so we could observe what's happening in that Hamner Citrus area. The cameras have been very useful as far as observing traffic and traffic signal operations. In general, we have not really solved crimes. One thing we ran into, we would have people call in and say there was an accident. Can you look up your camera and see if you have the data? The camera creates so much data that it overwrites the hard drive every 2.5 weeks. And so we looked at changing the resolution, and the resolution was not good at all. And so we backed off of that issue. We can't say we've solved specific crimes. It's been useful as far as traffic flow and observing traffic signal operation. One of the concerns that has been expressed is being able to read license plates and be able to visually, facial recognition types of things. We talked a little bit about earlier about license plate reading. Those are very focused cameras looking in very specific areas, picking up license plates. And I think one of the issues we've had is we've been very broad focused, so we can see a larger area, and that's probably hurt us as far as being able to visually identify plates or facial features. Anyway, I raised this issue with the owner of the company, and she got back to me actually after this report went out and said that they had looked at the cameras and they felt like the resolution was subpar, and they felt like it was probably a part of a bad batch of cameras that came out a year ago. And I'm kind of frustrated with that. Why didn't you recognize that earlier? So anyway, they've got new cameras on order, and so they will install those cameras, and we're going to see if things improve in that regard. And when somebody calls in, if there's an accident, we'd like to be able to look and be able to visually see what's happening. And we may, if the resolution has improved substantially, we'll probably increase the hard drive size. We have more than 2.5 weeks of data. And there's also a mistake in this report. I believe we said the ongoing cellular cost for the 3 cameras was approximately $1,800 per month. It's $1,800 per year. That's a serious typo. But you actually access these cameras via cellular. They can be pulled up on a computer screen or on the handheld. And so it's very useful as far as seeing traffic flow and how things are operating. Hopefully the resolution will be improved. So I think our recommendation, I'm not sure if we're really ready to go to City Council. I think we should get the new cameras installed and then reevaluate how well the cameras are functioning as far as being able to identify features and if we can see plates, and see if we can better utilize the cameras with improved resolution. And that's basically, we'd like to come back after 6 months and report how that's going.
Any questions?
What's the cost of new cameras? Is it borne by us or borne by them?
No. The owner of the company called me up and says we have ordered you new cameras and we will be installing them as soon as we receive them.
Okay.
There's no cost. There's a 3-year warranty. We're into 1 year of 3 years for the warranty on the cameras too.
If we have an accident, those intersections, can the deputies get access to view?
The deputies have full access. Yes.
Very good.
So we should table that until we...
I think we should table it for 6 months and we'll return after we receive the new cameras.
Okay. So do we need to make a motion on that, and in order to table it for 6 months, further discuss it at that time?
I think that's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. At this time, the floor is now open to public comment. Do we have any?
Were you going to vote for item 5.2?
I'm sorry, let's go ahead and vote for item 5.2.
Make a motion to table item 5.2 until the new cameras arrive and Public Works could adequately evaluate the effectiveness.
Second the motion.
Commissioner Dinko?
Aye.
Commissioner Wall?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Vice Chair Perilla?
Aye.
Chair DaCosta?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
I apologize. Item 6, public comment. Do we have any?
No, we have not received any.
City staff report, item 7.
Good evening, Commissioners. Since we're kind of on the topic of economic development, just wanted to give you a brief update that I think you'll find exciting. The Eastvale Marketplace, as you know, that's where Smart and Final is located. I'm hoping you'll be happy to hear there are some different dining options that will be coming into that location. Today the sign went up for 10 Ren Tea House. It's, I have not been to one, but I understand it's really good food, Asian flair. You've also got Creamistry coming in and Poke Delight. And you have Miguel's Jr., El Pollo Loco, and unfortunately I have one other very exciting tenant that I just can't share quite yet. Burgerim is also coming in.
I'm sorry, who is that?
Burgerim. It's I know you're going to say, oh my gosh, one more burger place, but it is a very unique burger restaurant. They're coming out of Irvine. And it's kind of like sliders. You get a box full of different types of little sliders that are like no GMO, you know, all healthy meat. Crazy Crab is also coming into that shopping center. So El Pollo Loco, Miguel's Jr., Crazy Crab, Poke Delight, 10 Ren Tea House, Burgerim, Pyology. And then, of course, you've got a nail salon, a dentist, cleaners, and urgent care. And a mathnasium and a pharmacy. So please shop Eastvale this holiday season. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Putting cameras on the exit.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions for Michelle's report?
Oh, and I'm sorry, one last announcement for the commissioners. We hope you'll join us on December 13th. That is our last city council meeting for 2017. And we're going to do some coffee and light dessert about half an hour before the council meeting for socializing and kind of getting to know the council members and commissioners, and then head into a kind of a long meeting where we will be potentially selecting, council will be selecting a new mayor and mayor pro tem, and then reaffirming their commission appointments. So we hope you'll join us.
Thank you. Item 8, Commission Communications.
Oh, wait, we have some staff.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Aaliyah.
You have more staff eagerly awaiting to give you an update. But I'll be brief. Today we didn't install, but our contractor Deckerlight installed military banners last night, actually late last night. So out of our 65 pre-approved poles, we are pretty much at capacity for all of our military banners, which is great. We do recognize that there are a couple that need to be pulled down due to sun damage and wind damage. We'll be working with those families to make sure that they want to incur those costs to put the banners back up, and if not, we will present them on the December 13th meeting along with the other banners that were taken down due to the status of the military person being no longer active. The roadway adoption signs were installed. We have a press release probably going out tomorrow on those roadways that were adopted. We have a lot of signs that were installed. I want to say there was 18 to 20 signs. So we have multiple groups that are out there keeping Eastvale beautiful. So thank you to the community for doing that. And we do have other roads that are available for adopting. Lastly, we don't have, but the JCSD has the Winter Wonderland this Saturday at Eastville Community Center from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., and the city will have a booth there as well. And that is all I have on the PIO front.
I just have a couple of boring reports for your commission tonight. So, as usual, construction. So, if you see Hamner Avenue, you see the storm drain project is coming to a close, the major one, except the big one now is coming at Limonite and Hamner. It's always flooded in that area, small flooding. We're adding a catch basin there, so the work's going to start in a couple of days for about a week or maybe hopefully 10 days. And we try to do it as much as we can 2 weeks before Christmas to finish that. We understand that people are shopping and going to have some fun in that area. So we apologize for that. A slurry seal project is coming up, and it's going to start early December all the way throughout. And notice is going to be given to the community not to park. And so if you receive notices, and please tell your neighbor as well not to park during the slurry seal days. And we're trying to improve our traffic signal as much as we can, and understand that because of the shopping experience, Black Fridays created some traffic signal nightmares on Hamner Avenue and Eastville Gateway. We're watching that. We are in the process of actually having a traffic timing for holidays, so we can make some adjustments. So people who are going to shop, they don't have to wait for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes just to get the green. And some of them, as a result, have made some illegal left turns. So we try to improve that. We continue to receive comments from publics and from yourselves sometimes, so we appreciate that. And that's the report we have. Quite boring, but it's a necessity of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission communications.
I had one. I just actually want to thank the city's Public Works Department, Joe and Gonzalo. I live next to the Stratham Community Development, and my neighbors and I have been having one heck of a time with the dirt there. And the day before Thanksgiving, you guys jumped right on the ball, and so I just want to say thank you, and my neighbors appreciate the response you guys gave to that. It was very quick and very swift, so thank you.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I thank you all for giving us detailed information tonight with all the presentations and reports. And I don't have anything either. I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. With that,
I'd like to motion that we wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
I don't think there are any future agenda items, so motion to adjourn. Thank you.